how do you convince a ticket-paying audience that this is the event you should pay a premium price for tickets to go to when they're already putting stratospheric prices on the Mayweather-McGregor tickets?
Well, I think part of the reason, or maybe even most of the reason why they're in Vegas is because the casino is buying a pretty big allotment of those tickets, right? Like that's how, they're able to make a lot of the money on that gate, is the casinos are gonna buy some of that. So I don't think that's gonna be I don't think that's gonna be an issue at all. I think both fights will sell, but will Golovkin and Canelo have to maybe sell tickets for slightly lower price than they originally had thought? That might be the case for sure.
I agree. So, unless Peter has another question, I think we do have to turn to Bellator 180 at some point. So, Peter?
Well, the only thing I would ask Gigi is, who do you think is stricter with the drug testing between boxing and UFC? Because, I mean, I'm not saying someone's going to fail a drug test. I'm just thinking, is boxing on the same level as UFC's drug testing at this point?
So boxing isn't an organization like the UFC. It would more be like boxing versus MMA, and then you would say, oh, well, the UFC and Bellator and World of Fighting, or whatever they're going to be called soon, they're sort of independent of, and they have their own stuff going on. And so the UFC is very adamant about, their drug testing, because they needed to get out ahead of that stuff. So in the case of boxing, it's usually based on what they agree on, what the promoters agree on. I think in this fight they are using USADA to do the drug testing, but it's basically more about what the commissions think is okay, and in most cases, without USADA, the commissions think that a drug test right before the fight and a drug test after the fight is enough. But I think they are using USADA here. So, Floyd's been USADA tested before. He's actually had an issue with the drug testing situation where he got a TUE. I think it was after the Pacquiao fight, which was after his weight cut. He got fluid, and I think he didn't have the exemption for it by the time he was supposed to have the exemption for it, or something. So, there's stuff involved there that has happened to Floyd before. But what is going to stop a lot of people from making a boatload of money? Probably nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of a boatload of money, I'm sure that's what Bellator is hoping for with the pay-per-view this weekend, because they're counting on this card that they've loaded up for Madison Square Garden being the event of the summer, and to use their own hyperbole, the biggest show in Bellator history. Gigi, do you think it meets those qualifications?
Well, what is the current biggest show in Bellator history?
It would probably be the last time they were on pay-per-view, Bellator 120.
So that was Rashad and King Mo, correct? I'm sorry, not Rashad. Rampage.
Yes.
Rampage and King Mo. My interest for this show is a lot higher than my interest was for that show. So I think it will be a bigger show. I think it will even probably do a slightly higher buy rate than that show did.
It would be hard not to, because that only did 100,000 buys.
In this market, though, when the UFC is only doing, 250,000 buys, it would seem that doing that number would actually be a little bit harder. But I think because of a couple things, and one of those is there is still a large number of people who want to see Fedor fight, and it could be sort of that. You know how people are always trying to get those old WCW fans back? And they're like, how do we get these old WCW fans who, right when WCW was bought by WWE, they just stopped watching wrestling? I think there is a small pocket of Fedor fans who are mostly Fedor and Pride fans and don't really like the current UFC product. So I think they're going to get some folks there. And I think as much as, Chael is such a blowhard these days, he's still pretty good at marketing. And my only worry is, what happens if Vanderlei gets cold feet, or if both of these guys miss weight, or I don't even know is what's the catch weight on that fight? I feel like I haven't heard anything about weight or anything, and it's just all about getting these two guys in the cage because they hate each other so much.
Well, I believe it's 205 pounds according to the bout sheet in front of me, but I also think if both of them came in at 215 or 220, they'd still have the fight. They'd just sign a new contract on the spot.
Yeah. And talk about, I was watching have you guys watched the hype show for it, that I think Sherdog put on YouTube a few weeks ago?
I feel like I've watched every single hype that they've had. That's why I chuckled a little when you said Chael Sonnen being a blowhard, because it's yeah, I've gotten nothing but that for the last 6 months now.
Yeah, and so I looked at both of their physiques, and I was like, wow, Chael really takes this drug testing stuff seriously. And then I looked at Vanderlei, and I was like, he doesn't take this stuff seriously at all. That dude was jacked. The thing that I'm actually excited about is, I know it's been, has it been 4 years since Vanderlei last fought? Something like that, 3 or 4 years.
Right, because they were originally supposed to have this fight, and then they both missed the date, and then they both failed drug tests, and they both ended up leaving UFC. So we're going on a 4-year build, not just from Vanderlei fighting, but from this fight first being announced.
And the thing that when I was looking up some stuff, right before Vanderlei stopped fighting, I think he was in 3 fight of the nights in a row, which shows that while he wasn't the same, he wasn't the same savage that he was back in the day, he was still someone who was going to go in there swinging, and he was going to put on a really good performance. And so I feel like there's still a decent ability for them, for people to kind of want, again, this is sort of like that circus freak show fight, kind of not to the level of Mayweather McGregor, but there's this weird curiosity about seeing these guys who really hate each other from everything that I can tell. I don't think a lot of this is show. I think most of this is pretty real. Chael's been pretty disrespectful to Vanderlei, and Vanderlei has a lot of pride, and he doesn't like the wink wink nudge nudge part of this. So I do think some of that feels pretty real, and it's kind of hard. We'll get it again with John Jones and Daniel Cormier, where some of that stuff definitely feels real. But a lot of times guys are searching for fights that they can sell, and they're making it very apparent. Someone like GSP and Michael Bisping, right? They're neither guy really cares about the other guy. They're just this is the biggest fight we can put on. So, I think there's a sense of realness sometimes that can be lost when the fighters get so much smarter. But in this case, I feel like it does feel a little real.
Yeah, I will say with Chael, it might be 80% real, but with Vanderlei, he makes up for it by being 120% real, because he not only doesn't like Chael personally, he also feels like Chael somehow, in the course of filming The Ultimate Fighter, disrespected the entire country of Brazil, and he feels, I must avenge my country.
Yeah, that was such a fun season of The Ultimate Fighter. Those guys, I don't know how many fights they got in.
And how many people got kicked off that show that season.
Yeah. I feel like Chael was able to babyface himself in that series a little bit, but when I watch these guys now, I don't really see him as much of a babyface. But they did that going back to that special, which you can find on YouTube. They did humanize him a little bit, which I don't know if this was a good or a bad thing, but I thought it was interesting because he's gone through some hardships in these last couple years, the loss of a child. and stuff. And so they humanized him for a little bit. And, you know, it kind of takes away from, you know, from what we're talking about. But I thought it was pretty interesting because you don't often get to see Chael as anything but braggadocious.